Hello, and welcome to the Neely Center's video series on ethics and decision making. My name is Abbas, and today we have a very special guest, Kirk Hanson. Kirk is the former director and senior fellow of the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics at Santa Clara University. He's also professor emeritus at the Graduate School of Business at Stanford and an advisory board member and fellow of the Neely Center for Ethical Leadership and Decision Making at USC. Welcome, Kirk.
Thank you.
So, Kirk, you've been teaching and advocating for business ethics for maybe 50 years now?
Yes.
Okay. How'd you come about making this as your life passion and life choice?
Well, I think I'm like a lot of undergraduates, that there was a happenstance that led me to think that this might be an interesting career. I got a call. I was editor of the Stanford Daily newspaper, and I got a call from an executive at Hewlett Packard who didn't like one of my editorials and said, come over and debate with us about business ethics at HP. And that led to a wonderful summer of meeting with him and meeting with Dave Packard and Bill Hewlett. And by the end of the summer, I was convinced that business ethics was such a critical field and that it was a good career for me.
We've talked about business ethics. And in the center you were directing at Santa Clara, there was multi-areas of ethics, including bioethics, government ethics, business ethics, technology ethics, and here at USC as well, which, by the way, the Keck School of Medicine has just joined the Neely Center.
Wonderful.
So really honored. And this opens up areas of convergence and intersections, like the intersections of technology and medicine. What are your thoughts on this, and how do you go about thinking about a multidisciplinary center like this, and should it be university-wide or school-wide?
Well, first of all, I want to commend you with the Neely Center at making it both a university-wide center and a multidisciplinary center. I don't think you can do ethics today just in the silo of business ethics or medical ethics or technology ethics or whatever. Whenever we address a problem today, inevitably there are dimensions of it that are addressed by private companies and therefore become business ethics issues, addressed by researchers in the medical field, so they become medical ethics issues, and technology questions that relate to that. So I found in running the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics at Santa Clara that it gave us a step up and gave us synergies that were unavailable any other way by having medical ethicists, business ethicists, government ethicists, and so on. And then we met once a week to talk about the issues in the news. Any issue in the news was relevant to three or more of the groups. We had six altogether, was relevant to three or more of them. And so it proved itself week in and week out that they could be helpful to each other in seeing the interconnections. And I think we were able to do commentary and make contributions to society's understanding of those ethical issues because we were a multidisciplinary center.
Coming back to business ethics, so could you tell us, for example, some of the things you and perhaps some of your colleagues and pioneers have helped make businesses more ethical?
Gosh, it's hard. This is basically the 50th year that I've been in the field. I got started in the late 60s. My internship at Hewlett Packard was the summer of 1967. And so I've been reflecting a bit and actually writing a book about what we've accomplished or failed to accomplish in 50 years. And I think, unfortunately, the record is not great. We have a succession of scandals that have gone on uninterrupted since the 1960s. Only the most recent are Wells Fargo and Volkswagen and Siemens and so on, and the Me Too movement. So from that standpoint, there's a sense in which nothing has been accomplished. On the other hand, there's been a lot of work on how you manage ethically. And if we can create the right will to act on the part of executives, I think we know a lot more now about how to behave ethically and how to manage ethically.
Yeah. Now, you were at a university and for most of your career as well. And so how do you rate the teaching and education of ethics, and is there room for improvement? And what are the things that we could do to help us improve ethics education, especially also in multidisciplinary besides business?
Sure. It was interesting. In 1978, when I was coming out of my graduate program, that was the year that the secular universities appointed their first business ethics professors. And I got the job at Stanford, and a good friend got the job at Harvard, and another friend got the job at Wharton. And the three of us began to work together to build the field. There were also a few people in Jesuit universities and Jewish universities who had made business ethics a focus. But we began to build the field. I think we were naive at first. We didn't quite know what to teach. We taught issues, employing the hardcore unemployed, or dealing with diversity, hiring African Americans in business, and a little bit of environmental kinds of issues. So it was issue-focused rather than learning about how to manage ethically. We also were naive in that we felt, gosh, if we just tell these business school students what to do, they'll do it. And so we found ourselves, unfortunately, getting a very good reception from the students who were already committed, arguably for those who didn't need it as much. And we were unable to find the breakthrough that would get these messages across to the students who were resisting, the students who felt that the free market was the answer to everything.
Yeah, yeah. You know, some people say being ethical is more about being prudential. And if you're ethical, you're going to get more money. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's a fundamental decision that every person makes in their life, which is what's your mission or what's your motive in working in healthcare or working in business or working in government. For some people, it's getting ahead in terms of wealth. And I would argue that the culture of the United States is much more oriented towards making great wealth for oneself if you're a professional in any field now than it was in the past. But there are others, and they're in every field, whether in medicine, people who are just so mission-oriented to try to solve the problems of disease or to serve people in our healthcare hospitals and clinics, or in business who see business as a way of creating a community, an institution that's a true community of people that has real concern for the employees. And so I think there's a fundamental question about what your motive is that has to be answered at the outset. And I'm pleased to say that I continue to run into students that I taught 40 and 30 years ago, who I'm very proud of today, who are able to articulate and have pursued a career where they sought to serve society and serve their employees and serve the people who use their products in very real ways.
Yeah. In fact, one of them you will meet at the conference tomorrow, so I know of that. What do you think held corporations from pushing more towards an ethical direction?
I think corporations, unfortunately, over the last 30 to 50 years, have been even more assaulted by this single-minded notion that the free market is the answer to all problems. And we look back to 1970, sort of at the beginning of this 50 years. Milton Friedman, the economist, wrote his famous article, "The only responsibility of business is to increase its profits." And that's been, if you like, the philosophy that we've had to argue against for the entire 50 years. And that's translated into the markets demanding quarterly returns. It's translated into raiders and activist investors who are demanding only increased revenues and increased profits so that they can make a quick hit. And those pressures on the typical executive in a sizable company today are very, very difficult to manage. And I think that's the biggest barrier to making progress in business ethics. There are some small businesses and some medium-sized businesses, founder-led businesses, that are really exemplary. Many of them have joined together now in a new movement called the B Corp movement that declare themselves to be explicitly organized to serve social as well as economic ends.
Yeah, and so that's a good point. So let me ask you another thing. We're hearing today artificial intelligence, and that's becoming a big thing. How do you see that might impact the business world and business ethics?
Well, I think one of the tasks that ethicists like you and me have is to anticipate the next big issue. One of the biggest challenges is to be able to look over the horizon and say, what's the next ethical challenge that we don't today have an answer to? And unfortunately, we've been pretty bad at that. If you go back 50 years, there was a phenomenon called technological assessment, in which there was an attempt to build systems whereby we would ask questions about the safety effects and effects on society of new technologies. That's needed so much more today with the information technology, with the biotechnology advances. And of course, Silicon Valley's become the ethical bad boy in the world because it has not looked over the horizon, but has stumbled into privacy issues and stumbled into misuse of data. And suddenly we find that they've been collecting our location data, which we didn't realize. And not to anticipate that and to develop systems to address it seems to me to be a core ethical failing of industry and medicine that is not anticipating the next ethical challenge.
Yeah. We make a distinction between an ethical and a legal system.
Yes.
Do you think there's more room for legislators or public policy to help, impact some of the ethical issues that we see today?
Well, I think the first thing to acknowledge is that you have to have some degree of regulation and some degree of legislation addressing creating the boundaries in which businesses operate. So reluctantly, even Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook yesterday said something to the effect, well, we need regulation around all of our practices. And of course, there's not a great amount of knowledge within the legislature, within the Senate and the Congress of the United States that would let them do a good job of regulating right now. So we're going to need a dialogue with the companies to figure that out. But yes, you need that. Maybe antitrust law has to continually evolve every decade. But it's absolutely critical to setting the norms. At the same time, it can't address all of the ethical issues that one ought to be addressing. And unfortunately, one of the things that's happened, it's a pathology in my view, is that companies have moved from thinking of their task as managing ethics to think of their task as managing compliance. And so the Ethics Officers Association, which was created back in 1990, is now the Ethics and Compliance Officers Association and made up primarily of lawyers whose job it is to make sure that the law is followed, regulations are followed, not that the company is thinking about ethics.
So where do we go from here? I mean, you have had a whole career in ethics and business ethics and various other. Where's the future going? What should we be doing today?
I've been, quote, retired, although it's just that I'm taking on a portfolio of activities. I stepped down as director of the Markkula Center just last fall. And I've been doing this assessment of where are we, and I'm a little discouraged, as I've indicated here. But I think the challenge at this point is to double down on some of the things that we've learned. And one of the things we've learned is that character matters and that personal commitment to a mission, which is broader than simply profit making, is critically important. And so we need a new generation of leaders. And whether the millennials, we thought my generation, the post-war baby boom generation, was going to change everything. We didn't, and we are now the problem. Maybe the millennials, my children are all millennials, maybe they'll have a different perspective on mission than we had. But we need a set of leaders and a set of people with a different character than the ones we've had. Second thing is we do need to improve oversight, which includes the regulation and the legislation, and oversight by boards of directors and by other mechanisms within society. I'd say the third thing is we have to get even better at understanding what motivates people to do the right or the wrong thing, and then create ethical cultures within the organization, which will help them do the right thing rather than incent them to do the wrong thing. And of course, incentives are a major piece of that. The sad story of Wells Fargo and firing 5,000 salespeople for making up false accounts is simply a matter of the incentive systems. They got down at one point in Wells Fargo that the salespeople had to meet goals every hour for opening new accounts. It wasn't a shift or a week or whatever. And if you have that kind of real tight control with your incentives, it's inevitable you're going to have misbehavior and unethical action. I'd say the last thing in this hyper political time is hard, but we need to get serious about creating different social norms. And unfortunately, our social norms as a society have been under attack the last 3 years since the last presidential election. And truth is in question, and questions of bullying, questions of demonizing, and so on. The behavior at the federal level is having a damaging effect on our society. There's been bad behavior everywhere, but it's more there recently. And so we have to find a way in the wake of this period of time, this administration, of recovering our core values which have characterized American society really throughout its 240-year history.
On a lighter note.
Yes.
And this is a personal one. White lies. Are they okay or not okay?
Oh, there are times that white lies are ethical, not just okay, but required. When my mother used to ask, how's the meatloaf? There was only one answer, which was, it's wonderful. And I think there's a sense in which we all have to be kind, and so there are cases like that. The problem is the slippery slope. I just justified one white lie. This next one, it's sort of like that, but... and then it gets worse, and then it gets worse, and then it gets worse.
Escalates.
It escalates. So the slippery slope in ethics terms is a real thing. And if you begin to justify your behavior too much, you can slip down that and say, oh, well, it's okay in this case that I lie because I can pile up a pile of money in the process.
Kirk, it's been a real pleasure, and thank you very much for your efforts. Also on our advisory board, and certainly look forward to continued collaboration in the future as well.
Well, Ali, I appreciate being asked to be involved in the Neely Center and to be a part of the dialogue that you've created here to look at the ethical issues that cross-cut across the university. So I'm grateful for that.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.